Yo! So there's this game called Legend of Korra that's out right now. Came out for all platforms and it happened specifically between the second and third book. I'm Demon, this guy next to me is Angel, and I'm about to play Devil's Advocate. So Paul, tell me about this game.
Okay, so of course y'all know it came out for just about every system, including PC, made by Platinum developers, which created Bayonetta, Infinite Space, Mad Worlds, Vanquish, Metal Gear Rising, Wonderful 101, all kinds of great action adventure fighting type games. So everybody had a lot of hype and expectations out of this game, and at least in my personal experience, along with many other people that played the game, it was extremely well done. The action was fluid. They did a lot of research into the combat system and the individual martial arts that each bending style was based off of. Well, I believe it was Northern Shaolin, which was earth bending, and Tai Chi, which was water bending. They just went into each one, even if you just switch into those styles. Korra stands in the proper stance in each one, so it's just really amazing the way they do that.
Cool. With all that being said, I heard that, like there's Tai Chi, there's all this like different types of styles. Why do people say that this game is too repetitive? Because that's been the main thing about this game.
Well, from what I'm seeing, as far as a lot of the mainstream reviewers, they play it for a little bit and they kind of see the face value of it. They get to the top layer of the ice and think that's really all that it's about, where it's really only as repetitive as you make it. Where on the lower difficulties you can go through with maybe playing on one element as soon as you unlock it, and that'll get you through, and that's perfectly fine. There's two buttons, heavy and light attacks, you can charge them up, things like that. But if you just play it as if there's two buttons there, that's really all you're going to get out of it. Whereas, especially on higher difficulties, Platinum Games is notorious for huge difficulty spikes. And at least personally, I was forced to use all of my elements just to keep up with everything, whereas if I was swarmed by a bunch of enemies, I had to use some airbending. I had to move quickly once I upgraded my damage, so I would go to firebending at times. And then for some defense, I had to use my earthbending a lot of times, where there's a heavy attack that shoots a pillar of rock up in front of you, and that's supposed to be normally an attack, but I found that you can also use it as a defensive tool when somebody throws something at you or tries to hit you. You can actually shoot that up as a defensive wall and then kick it at them once you upgrade that, which I found just amazing. I didn't expect at all. And then at the same time, on the higher difficulties, a lot of the Tai Chi, the Chi blockers will dodge around those moves and just attack you with this huge chain of hits that will actually take away your bending temporarily, just like in the show. And it made me have to not rely on my earthbending as defense so much, and I had to rely on more mobility. So it just goes back and forth with, as the AI figures out how you play, it'll actively try to work around that and create something that'll allow it to win, which is why a lot of people started calling it cheat, because they started using what this AI had as access to actively just destroy you, and I ran into that a lot.
All right. Speaking of the difficulty level, I've seen you play this game quite some time over the course of you actually playing it, and every time I walk in the door, I see you bashing your face in with a controller or just screaming "damn it" randomly, and dying more than living. So, explain your frustration with the difficulty, and then how you still love the game, like, throughout all that.
Well, it's just like all the games, of course, Dark Souls and Metal Gear Rising, which was also Platinum, and Bayonetta. And it also gives me a lot of a Devil May Cry feel, where it's as fun as you make it, where you can upgrade all of your combos and do all these things, and it's a lot of fun, and then you hit that wall, and you just keep getting destroyed because the AI just gets so smart and figures out just what to do to screw you over, whether it's timing all of their grapple moves just so that they're one after the other and you have no chance to really counter that, or if it's just certain things where they'll bottleneck you into this one corner and then pound you with everything they have, or just anything that, or just the Naga running bits. But
yeah, that's a different story.
we'll talk about that later. But there's any number of things that go wrong when you try a combo. There's any one thing, because they can block, they can counter as well, they can just completely dodge it, and then they have electrical attacks from their fists that actually are not blockable, and they can't be interrupted by combos. So it actually forces you to stop your combo, dodge out of the way, and then continue whatever you were doing or move on to a different target, because on extreme difficulty especially, you don't have the luxury of just bouncing around and returning fire. You actually have to really move and be damaging them at the same time, because they will just Zerg rush you and stop you from being able to do just about anything.
Okay. One thing specifically about the difficulty, extreme difficulty,
Yeah.
and that I've seen you die the most with, were these robots that you had to fight. Not robots, these machines. What?
Power suits.
Power suits. There have been multiple, even with the Nagas thing, that you had to kill, and if I ever saw you die, it was with those robots. I mean machines, whatever, power suits. So, and also at the same time, I feel like those battles were very repetitive, like those specifically, because all you did was the same thing. I don't know if that was just you or that's what you have to do. So, explain that.
Well, what I'd say, it's definitely true that what I found on the extreme difficulties that they actually add enemies to your repertoire that you have to fight, and it got very unfortunate, since I would play through the normal mode, finish that expecting something normal, and then seeing 2 giant robot things show up, or power suits. I'm going to go with whatever adjective I feel like right at the moment. But I'd just see so many different things that I hadn't seen in the previous difficulty, and it would take me off guard every time. Like, I burst through this wall one time to get through to a secret that I knew was there, and lo and behold, a giant power suit comes flying out of it, hits me immediately with like 5 other chi blockers coming after me, and I immediately die because I wasn't expecting it at all. But there's certain ways to take them down. What I found I was running into a lot is that once you get them to a certain health, their combo system changes, where they kind of shoot their claw into the ground and this electrical wire shoots up to try and hit you as a distance attack. And normally that only hits you about 3 times. Well, on the extreme difficulty, I found that it kind of goes from 3 to 4 sometimes, and then they turn red close to the end of their life, and they can hit you up to like 4 or 5, and once it hit me 6 times, and it blew my mind, because I was like, well, what the heck? Why am I supposed to, how am I supposed to beat this? And it was just tearing me apart. And then there's some other things that they'll change, whereas a lot of the normal combos, they would just have normal moves that you could counter well, the electrical attacks you can't. So they would have an electrical arm that they'd charge you with, and it wouldn't allow you to do your normal moves. And especially on the lower difficulties, your earthbending is your really only best bet on doing any decent damage, which is what I ended up sticking with when I fought them a lot. But later on, when I maxed out everything, I would switch to firebending a lot, because it did a lot of damage very fast, or airbending, which would really move things around, especially if there was a lot of other enemies nearby the power suit, or of course waterbending if I needed some distance.
Okay. So people like Kotaku, like IGN, GameSpot, those 3 come to mind specifically. They took a dump on this game. They pulled down their pants, got ready, and dumped on this game. IGN gave it a 4.2 out of 10. GameSpot gave it a 3 out of 10, and Kotaku, they just said no. No. What specifically do you think was their reasoning for that?
Well, of course I'm going to be I want to be biased, but of course I'm going to be objective about this game. Of course, it does have its fallacies, where the cutscenes themselves are admittedly just terrible. They look like they were made at like 10, 12 frames per second. There's a lot of off-model action going on. Some of the lines don't seem to add up. It looks like they tried, and of course, for the game, I wasn't really expecting much from the cutscenes themselves. But naturally, I have to admit, they were pretty terrible. So that is one thing. Another thing, of course, they said was the combat system felt repetitive, which we've already addressed that. The plot itself, I know it was written by Brian and Mike, the original creators, and I can see their touch on different things, but I can't understand. They're saying it's a lot more of this storyline coming out of nowhere. Where is everybody else that plays? Of course, all of the characters are voiced by their original. At least I believe most of them are. I'm not sure about Janora, but all of them are played by the original voice casters. Unfortunately, not many of them show up, and if they do, they show up for a few seconds. Or, of course, Mako and Bolin appear for about 10 seconds during one of the earlier cutscenes, get knocked out during the pro bending match, and don't appear until very close to the end. So I can understand a lot of people's favorite characters not showing up, but of course I didn't expect much since it's a Legend of Korra game. It's a single-player action style, so I had a feeling there was going to be a lot of Korra-centered action, which I'm fine with that. And then, of course, there was the fact that it was a really short game. I beat it on the normal difficulty in around 5 hours, just about, give or take. The extreme difficulty bumped that up to at least like 10, 12 hours by itself, because it's just that hard of a game, and you really had to work on the combat system to really understand it. Something else that I noticed they specifically mentioned was the item system. And it works a lot like, if you're not familiar with it, it's you buy the item, you get health, you get a restart of your life after you die, Phoenix Feather kind of thing, Phoenix Down. And unfortunately, if you use that and you still die, you don't get the item back. You have to rebuy it and things like that. Now, they just tore that mechanic up and they said it's stupid, it's terrible, it's not a working system, but I'd like to point out the fact that Devil May Cry has been using that for decades. Well, not decades, but a very long time. And not only would you buy the item and lose it if you died, but it would also boost the price of buying that item if you had to buy it again. Whereas it was actively trying to force you from using items to get through problems. And I found that the more I banked on using items, the more I got screwed over because I was so focused on using that health item to try and get me through it all. Now, naturally, you can go back and gain the spirit orbs, I believe is what they call the currency in that game, to in the Legend of Korra game, to actually keep buying more items and heal yourself and things like that. But it's more about just understanding the combat system, overcoming all the things through that, and not relying on your items. So that's basically what I have to say on that.
Okay. Before, when you started that sentence, that very long paragraph,
Yeah.
you said that you wanted to be biased, but you were going to be objective. Are
Right.
you defending this game so hard because you personally enjoy the series so much?
I definitely say I love the series. I have to admit that. It's great. It's amazing. I love the characters, love the action, love the style. And at first looking at the game, I'd say any fan of the show, it's a definite sell. It's great. It's showing all of your favorite characters. Well, not all. That's actually a lie. if Korra's your favorite character, you're definitely going to see it. But it got a lot of continuity, got a lot of mythology jokes of things that happened in the past and little dialogue bits that Korra will say calling back to something that happened in the past, or the fighting styles themselves, even all the way back to Avatar, The Last Airbender. You'll see all of the same types of moves, whether it's the little air scooter that Korra will ride around on that Aang developed, or just little things here and there you'll love. But of course, if you don't love Korra, or like if you've never heard of it, I'd say the plot will completely leave you confused, because they kind of assume that you understand or know certain things, like what an avatar is, how the bending works, how the pro bending moves, the pro bending rules actually work, along with a lot of the other, like why the spirits are in the real world and things like that, which is something that happened at the end of season 2. So if you don't like, or if you just don't know what Korra is, I would suggest watching either of the Avatar: The Last Airbender or Legend of Korra, preferably both. And if you do not like Korra, or just don't like anything about the show, I probably wouldn't recommend it, because it's very centered around the continuity of that story. The combat system is great personally, but I don't think it would be able to save anybody that already doesn't like the show.
Okay. Final question. This is a $15 game. It came out. It doesn't take too long to beat it. Would you suggest this game? Well, is it worth it?
Absolutely. I'd say, $15, of course, I can't say, oh, that's not a lot, you should just buy it anyway, because, of course, wasting money is still wasting money. And there's certain games that are out there that are $15 that I would say definitely do not buy. I wouldn't even suggest them if they were $1 to buy, because they just wouldn't be worth it. Now, this game I'd definitely say is worth $15. From my standpoint, I'd buy it if it was $30, $40, maybe not $60, because it's really not that much of a game lengthwise. But I'd definitely say for $15, if you've never heard of Korra, or if you like Korra, or if you just like free-flowing combat action that's reminiscent of Devil May Cry or Bayonetta, or just about any of those combo-centered action games, I would definitely suggest this.
Awesome. Well, guys, that was your first game review. This has been the Legend of Korra video game. I am Demon, this is Angel,
Yeah.
and we are out. Peace.
Out.